Thank you, Ken, for that wonderful introduction. And I'd like to thank the Australian Institute of Physics and the Teachers Guild of New South Wales for the invitation to share the work of the STEM Teacher Enrichment Academy. But first, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we practice, teach, and learn. I extend my respect to elders past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to any who are here with us today. You can all hear me well? Yes? Okay, loud and clear. The acronym STEM, particularly for education, was coined in the early 2000s. The discussions had started in the late 1990s. The STEM Academy launched its first program in 2014. So it can be counted as amongst the first substantive STEM education programs nationally, including Scots and Careers in STEM and other projects that we've heard about. The primary program was launched in 2017. Our programs are established, they are recognized, if I may say so myself. We've got a wait list of schools that are keen to participate in our programs. So they've endured and they've stood the test of time, and I'll sort of share some of the work of that with you. Now, the Academy was set up by Professor Judy Anderson to the University of Sydney. She developed and ran the first secondary program in 2014. The primary program was developed by Jenny Way, and Deb Telly did a lot of work in terms of research and trying to figure out efficacy amongst teachers and students and so on. Currently, we have secondary team, primary team, and we've got admin and technical support. Most of the staff members are working on a variation in contract, 10% or 20%, so these are not all full-time staff members. In fact, I'm not full-time on this, working on the academy as well, but it's the primary job that I do. Now, the academy actually is currently running year-long programs for up to 250 teachers at any one time. And the programs run in secondary and primary. They run in Sydney as well as a selected regional area in New South Wales. So it's quite a massive undertaking. And that's the work that I'm going to share with you. Now, some of the things that I'm going to talk about actually lead on and develop the tensions and ideas that have already been discussed so far. So my presentation is going to be about conceptualizing integrated STEM and in-school curriculum. I'm going to talk about how this idea of integrated STEM is deployed in our programs, which are in-service teacher training programs, teacher education programs. And then I'm going to finish off with a tantalizing bit. What is the promise of STEM, integrated STEM? What is apparent, measurable, the alluring, and a few of the things that are evasive from our point of view that we're trying to sort of grapple with. So first of all, conceptualizing integrated STEM in curriculum. What does it actually mean? What can it look like? And how we are conceptualizing it in our programs. So when we look at STEM, it is bringing together of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And that's how it was coined in the early 2000s. Looking back at it, it appears to be naive, but you've got to start somewhere, right? And that was the starting point. So it kind of missed the vocational aspects from that point of view, but it's embedded in there. And STEM, integrated STEM, is the confluence of all of those disciplines and more disciplines as well, because that's a very small snapshot of all the disciplines that are incorporated. Like it was mentioned below, biotech, medicine, health, all of those kind of come in there as well. So when we look at the subject areas themselves, while there are distinctive differences and features, there is still a lot of overlap and commonalities, not just in content, but also in the way that things are approached, the skills and so on. Again, the differences again are in the way things are approached, the mathematical thinking, the scientific thinking, the computational thinking and so on. So differences and yet similarities, and STEM is when they all come together with the differences and with the similarities. And that's what STEM is, the way that we conceptualize it. Now, in the current context, when we think about technology, especially the computational technologies, it possibly isn't a separate circle. It is encompassing everything else, because all the other disciplines kind of sit within technology, because all the other disciplines rely, use technology. All right, so that's how we think about that. Now, when we think about education, all right, so that's a kind of framework, but when we try and paint this and map this onto education, education is a social enterprise which actually needs to deliver a process and an outcome. It can have no boundaries. It does need to have boundaries for measuring, deploying, for the processes, outcomes, and so on. So when we think about education, there are curriculum and syllabuses, and they are of necessity and important basically because they bind what happens within a classroom, they contain, and they make it doable and operational, the act of education. Does it kind of make sense? Okay, good. Because these understandings are really important to balance the philosophical and the pragmatic when we talk about such massive endeavors. Now, when we talk about the New South Wales curriculum, science and technology sits together in primary. When we go into secondary, then we have curriculum, the syllabuses for technology, but then there are many syllabuses. And then when we go into science, there's one science which has all the disciplines in it. And it may not make sense, and we may all think that we have our different solutions and this should be done this way. And vocational doesn't really appear in there, but it's critical, right? That's where the shortages are. So whatever it is, this is the lay of the land. And somehow we've got to make STEM work within this lay of the land. The lay of the land may change, but whatever the changes is, we've got to make STEM work, right? So that's the boundaries, the necessary boundaries, even though we may not agree with them, right? So then what we've done, what my predecessor did was she had a look at the literature, and at that time when this academy was set up, the literature on STEM pedagogies wasn't as robust because things were just starting up. There wasn't that much work in the area. Luckily, when she was trying to develop the program, and she was halfway through it, well, most of the way through it, Vasco published this particular article and this inclined plan of STEM integration. Now, in here, and I like pointing, so I'm going to move over and point, right? So in here, when we think about the disciplinary, it's in separate discipline areas. The content is bound within different discipline areas. As we move up, and the up doesn't really have any value add to it, we've got reference to a common theme, and then we've got two or more disciplines that are trying to work together tightly, and disciplines could be subject areas or whatever it is, right? And then out here at the end, and this is what we've had people alluding to, we've got real world problems, we've got real projects, like Aaron was saying, the students applying their knowledge from multiple disciplines and areas to solve a bigger problem, right? So that's a very useful program, and somehow there's value in this, because like you were saying, with Imogen, you'd learn fun of PPT. You need to learn the processes and the procedures and the content in each discipline and know it to depth, and then apply it across here. So that's really important. Together with that, there's this idea of the continuum of STEM project pedagogy. Right? So this is shifting from teacher-directed to student learning. And again, this is just as important as this, and we're trying to map this onto that. So this is where you've got the syllabus and the curriculum, and you've got to learn the processes and procedures within that subject area. And then the teacher lets go, and out here the students direct what they're doing, and the teacher monitors and supports. Now, most people here be familiar with this kind of stuff, right? So I'm not gonna iterate that too much. But that's the basic premise of the way in which our programs at the STEM Teacher Enrichment Academy are designed. Everyone's happy with that? Thumbs up? Good. Yeah, that's education 1001, right? Okay, good. Now the next bit is how the integrated STEM is actually deployed in our programs. How do we enact that? How do we operationalize it? And that's the next part of my little story. Now, our program is about teachers. I know there are lots of programs about teachers. I know that about students, where STEM goes to students. I also know that there are programs that go to teachers and then cascade onto students and so on. So ours works with teachers because one teacher, if they learn and they carry on that learning, impacts on lots of students from there onwards. Why is it in service? And that's really, really critical aspect, I think, and we've found. And the reason is, when we look at disciplinary learning out here, in order to solve a problem, like you need, some people in the team need to know in depth particular subject areas. You can't have everyone just knowing broadly everything that's happening. So STEM works in teams. Some students, some team members need to have different disciplinary strength in different areas. And then you go to this end out here where you've actually got, you're applying knowledge in a broader sense. So it's in service because when a fresh teacher goes out, or when you're training to be a teacher, you're trying to develop all of these skills about what does it mean to teach their discipline. Also, when a teacher goes out into a classroom, together with the teaching, you've got all of these other aspects of classroom management and what does it look like when the little people are working with equipment and so on. So when they come back as in-service, that's when they actually are able to know those constraints and then apply that to run projects and to make and create projects which will work in the classroom for them, for their context, for their own confidence as well. So the next part of that is here, for this, the curriculum is provided and there's forward mapping. The mapping was hinted at. You teach so that students can apply it later on. At this end out here, you come up with backward mapping. So if the project is actually for a local community, addresses a problem, it's an authentic project that you're trying to deal with, then you're working out here, here's the project. You can then go in, well, that's the curriculum elements, and I can slot them in and do them right now. Here's how I can change my scoping and sequencing and all. So that's why in-service works, because there's the back-end knowledge. You've taught the program and sequence once, so you can actually go back and figure out how to change it. Make sense? Okay, let's keep going. So a quick description, run through of our specialized programs. Our secondary program has 6 teachers coming in from each school. So each school has to say, I'm going to release 6 teachers. And each of our programs has about 10 to 12 partner schools, so 10 by 6 or 14 by 6, and that's the number of teachers. So that's a cohort that will work together at a particular time. We have one of these running in Sydney, and we have one of these running in a regional area, and we're running it in Lismore. We select an area, right? And Lismore, so Scott's working with us on that. And the thing is, each of these programs has a mix of schools. So we're department schools, Catholic schools, independent schools, and we go from ICSEA scores from 6 to 90. And so the teachers are in the classroom, in our cohorts, they share things and they'll say, well, we're doing the same as that other school and it doesn't matter where we are, what we are, here's how things are happening and so on. And the commonalities come through quite nicely. Now, the purpose of our secondary program is to connect teachers across the KLAs because they're all working in isolation within the KLAs, 2 of science, 2 of maths, 2 of tests. And the teachers are worried about the overcrowded curriculum. There's too much content. We are forward mapping, we are teaching. So the key idea is to create space in the timetables for STEM. One of the things that we do is we actually get the teachers to think about what's happening in the community, When they think about what's happening in the community, there's a problem, they figure out, they select that as their authentic project. But then they look at their syllabuses and they show scopes and sequences and they map it across. So what happens is the test teacher might say, I'm going to do this out here, and the math says, well, I'm going to teach that content here, but in teaching that content, the test teacher can do a bit of the maths. So by sharing, because there are commonalities between the subjects, by sharing, they reduce the content because the content gets shared. And instead of each one of them teaching teamwork separately, they are now doing an activity where teamwork gets done here, and then something else gets done there, and something else gets done there. So they kind of unpack and reduce the curriculum load on each of the discipline areas. What happens is then they often walk away and they say we can create a Friday afternoon to have a STEM session for all the classes together. So it's quite magic when this starts to work. And they come in and they choose to select to engage with these 6 teachers from each school because they come in and they're passionate teachers. They want to do the student learning and they're willing to give it a go. So they come in that with the premise that they want the students engaged and they want to develop the thinking skills. So that's what they come in with. Now, when we do our work, we focus on the school culture. I know most of you can't see it, and building teacher capacity. There's these other things which I think people have mentioned before, but we bring in the principal, the whole of school comes in, and we find quite often, despite the 6 teachers, the project becomes across a couple of years and stages. So what does the program look like? And it's scary. We start off with a 3-day residential starting on a Sunday. So teachers will spend 3 days with us and stay overnight twice. 2 nights, Sunday night and Monday night. And this first one out here sort of starts after HSC, so the schools can release their teachers. And then they go away and they implement the plan or the authentic project that they've actually designed. They then come in for another day in June to share, learn a few more tips and so on, develop further. They implement, and then they have a graduation. So it's an year-long program. 6 teachers come in from each school, and by the end, when they report, it becomes a whole of school in many cases. And then we have an ongoing community of practice. The primary is a smaller cohort because the problems are different over here. The teachers are hesitant. There's a sort of self-confidence issue, content knowledge, so they need more work in smaller groups. We go for stage 2 teachers because we find they take the project back and quite often it'll go down and up. So it becomes a whole of school project. There's another issue that keeps turning up with primary is they think that coding and robotics is STEM, right? So that's another thing we've got to walk through. They come in with where to start. I don't know where to start. Like there was a comment made that the students come in, our panel had actually said, it was scary, where do I start? So the teachers, primary teachers often come in with the same thing. We have designed something called level 1, level 2, level 3 activities, which means that we emulate what the teachers are going to do with their students, with the teachers, design-based thinking. The teachers come in wanting to develop their skills. That's what they're in there for. They actually come in with that. Over here, the thing that we focus on is creativity and evidence-based reasoning. When we come in with this, that means it de-emphasizes the prior content knowledge because they've got to figure out the reasoning, communication, and the future aspiration of students, because this is where, in primary, particularly, teachers don't know where STEM professionals are going. Program has much the same structure, starts in February, 4 teachers from each school, they implement. We also connect with after-school Zoom sessions, and all the teachers will attend, basically because they need more touch points. They can't be sort of left to go the way in which the secondary teachers are. Then we have a June session, we have another implementation, and then we have graduation in December. So again, a year-long program with about 40 teachers from about 10 schools working together in the community of practice. So it's quite substantive, 250 teachers for 1 year. That's how we are rolling it out. Okay, got that? Right, good. Now, the next thing is the promise of integrated STEM. So we really focus on integrated STEM. Quite often the projects come in and they'll start talking about, well, this other thing is happening and it grows bigger than Ben-Hur. So we've had HISI coming in, we've got economics, we've got other departments coming in. So in terms of apparent alluring, here's what we've kind of seen. I'm sorry, I'm quite blocking your view out here, but this is an example of a project on koalas, and we've got a primary. The first one is about primary. They're talking about genetic diversity, koala corridors, koala conservation. By the time you look at what the students have actually produced, it is much beyond their content level at that particular stage, right? So they do extraordinary work that's really in-depth. In this, the parents were involved as well. It really was quite impressive. So it was a small school in a regional area. The local problem was bushfires, koalas, and the students were worried. So parents, council, everyone got involved. Started with stage 2, but then the whole school got involved. Just a quick run through. I have become more confident in delivering and incorporating activities in my everyday teaching. In the beginning, it seemed almost scary, and then now intend to instruct others in the STEM processes to encourage further ideas that can be implemented by staff and students. I had always put STEM in the too hard basket, and I have learned a lot over the past year, including that you do not need a science degree to integrate STEM education into our class learning. So it really makes a difference to this primary school teacher's confidence level. And we've also got stats and numbers that I can churn out in terms of changes in self-efficacy and practices and stuff like that. So just a snapshot of where we're headed. In terms of secondary, the nature of the projects, and again primary, they're very, very different. What the schools end up doing is very different for each school. The life of bones, robotics is quite out there, drones, bugs, housing emergency, engines, and so on. A whole range of different projects turn up, and that is depending on the need or where the school connects within the environment. Here's a teacher working in a cross-faculty team, has been professionally very rewarding, and is something I would like to continue. So they get the urge to continue working as STEM with other faculties and no longer go back into their own disciplined ways in the same way. The profile of STEM has definitely increased, resulting in a more comprehensive STEM project. And so that one goes on saying that they've actually built a very strong cross-faculty integration that's going to stay within the school. And that's really empowering, right? That's just brilliant. Here are some comments from principals, and again, these are comments that we did not seek. At the end, when the graduation and showcase kind of ends and we sort of say bye-bye to the principals, they'll come back with something quite substantive. STEM will now have an ongoing presence serving to enhance and expand the life opportunities of our students. This is one particular principle. Feedback from students and the parents has been encouraging. So parents are now coming back and telling the principal and the schools that they notice the difference. And then this particular one was interesting. Teachers were able to develop a deep understanding of the syllabus and its content. So by looking at other subject areas and their syllabuses, because that's what happens in our program, we have the team looking at the science syllabus as well as the test and the maths. And you've got the different subject areas. So your understanding of what you're doing increases if you're able to see what others are doing as well. And I think that is really profound, that the principal noticed that. So the aim of the STEM Teacher Enrichment Academy, so I'm starting from back to front, I'm ending up with what the aim of our programs are. The aim of the STEM Academy is to inspire and infuse secondary teachers of STEM subjects, enriching and reinvigorating the classroom practice, and through this to improve student engagement. That's what we aim to do, and our data supports that we are succeeding in that. So that's a promise, and that's what we feel fully. However, what's evasive for us to actually measure for now, but I'm encouraged by what Scott was saying in the sense that he shows that there is a cascade effect, is that more students will continue to study these areas in year 11 and 12 and beyond. And one of the reasons for us is because it's really hard to get the student names. We are not with the schools, we are not embedded in the way you are, so it's really hard for us to get human ethics clearance and so on. We also find that the schools change their subject offerings and all sorts of compounding things actually come in as well, right? But we're going to see if we can do that. On the other hand, we really stress that our schools evaluate what they're doing. So the schools will have their own surveys, questionnaires. We have our surveys, questionnaires. In this particular survey out here, the blues strongly agree. Most of these items are positive. So the more blues you are having, the better it is. Sounds funny. The more blues you are having on the graph, the better it is, right? There is one item out here which is actually not so blue, and that is a negatively geared question. The question is, STEM is so difficult. So by doing this project, the students are saying, no, STEM is not that difficult. So that's the only one out there. Now, in this particular survey, for this particular school, the teachers also asked, STEM skills are essential to a successful career. To what extent do you think this statement applies to you? Now, over here, extremely blue is this one out here in this group, that they strongly agree with that statement out there, right? With me on that? So I mess around with my sentences. Okay. The oranges are slightly true. So they're students who are, the large majority of students are saying that that statement is slightly true. And so we're trying to figure out how that works and the rest of it. If I'm in a positive mood, I can actually say that more students have shifted from the green, saying that that statement doesn't apply, to the orange because of what we've done. Okay. So the alluring is there are lots of reports, and we've also heard that there is a need, and we need to continue working with STEM, so we definitely need more investment. And the other alluring thing is that STEM, if done well and appropriately, has the capacity to solve the complex global issues that we have right now. So as a finale, it is important to conceptualize the integrated STEM and its place in curriculum. You cannot just, it needs to be done well, conceptualized in a robust way. And we need to do this in an evidence-based manner and fit for purpose. The school curriculum is constrained by many things. Teachers and teaching is constrained. So it has to be fit for purpose. There are philosophical arguments and decisions and pragmatic as well. And we need to make them with respect to the deployment of the programs and what teachers are doing in the classrooms. The impacts of effective integrated STEM programs are apparent. There are differences that are showing up, but some measures are still proving invasive. And my question is, we've been trying and we're working on STEM, we're getting there. Is the journey too slow? Most of us would say yes. Should it be made faster? Yes. And one of the things we need to also consider are bigger structural problems for the STEM subjects and for the teachers. We've got bands coming in, the HSC bands, we've got the school success model, we've got other parameters which are inhibiting STEM and its subject in a bigger structural way, together with teacher shortages and so on.